Hello, everyone. First, I would like to say that thank you for having me again. It's an honor to be here working on the workshops this year. I'm I'm excited about the workshop this year because there are going to be a little bit of changes. Hopefully, I have a column in the middle, so I'm going to try to put in a place that everyone can. It's a bit complicated. So I'm going to tell you now. So first, let me start by the book. It's going to be a 3 hours session workshop. We're going to have a break in the middle. So we're going to have a small break in the middle. So if all the workshop contents are intended to be followed. So I'm going to share now. If you see there is a link here with the code, I'm going to show you now so you can actually follow from scratch. The objective, sorry, there is a bit of, Larry, could you turn it down a little bit? Okay. Good. So sorry about that. So then, again, it's going to be a 3 hour session. We are going to do quickly Cake PHP project setup from scratch, and we are going to try and build a plugin together. This plugin is going to be a report builder. I'm going to explain a little bit the objectives we're going to follow, but the idea of this plugin is to, the idea of the whole workshop is going to be aimed to people who is starting with the framework or at an intermediate level. So maybe some of you, the concepts are already familiar with, that's fine. If you want to raise your hand and add questions or comments about the code is not production grade, of course, so it is intended to be easy to read and to follow. And also the whole workshop is intended to be followed by you. So the idea is that I'm gonna share a link with all the code that we are gonna use today in order. So we both can follow the same code, you on your computers if you want, and I'm gonna follow it here. It's not mandatory that you follow the workshop, of course, but if you want, you can follow from scratch. You can just copy all the code in order. I'm gonna explain all the code that is what is going to do, and we can talk about the code if you have questions, etc. And you will see how that works in the screen, right? So here you have the code. Let me open that. So if you go to GitHub, Stanko, CakeFest 2024, this link here, you will see this is a repo. The repo has a link to the slides, if you want to follow the slides. It also has a link to the step-by-step, which is what I'm going to follow in the session today. And also, it provides all the code in a finished state. If you change to the workshop 1 branch, this is the project fully working as intended. So if you want to skip 3 hours, you can just check out that branch and run it. So the thing is, going back to the master branch, which is basically a blank project set up from scratch from Cake PHP, you can follow the contents as we are going to follow from here. So if you see, this is the link to the slides, and this is the link to the step-by-step, which I'm going to follow from now on. You see, the format of this document is going to be easy to follow. Basically, it's linking the slides with the code that we're going to do in the workshop. And the initial step is going to be setting up a project from scratch, which we are going to do hopefully very quick. Then this is me in case you want to contact me. And as we discussed already, the introduction for the workshop, the next step will be setting up the development environment. So you can set up your environment as you want. In case you want to use native PHP, that is fine. In case you want to use Docker Compose, Vagrant, Lambda, whatever other method, it's okay. In this workshop, I'm going to use ddev, right? This is a tool that we use frequently at CakeDC, and it's very convenient for set up your development environment if you don't like to deal directly with a Docker Compose file, which is usually pretty easy for CakePHP projects, but just in case you want some automation and tools on top of that, DDev will help you on that. So if you set up, you have the setup instructions here for DDev that you can follow. You can set up DDev in every environment, in Windows, Linux, or whatever. And I already set up DDev in my machine. So the next step we're going to do is to create a CakePHP 5 project skeleton from scratch. So if you see, this is going to be point number 1, DDev config, and this is going to be the project setup. So I'm going to do that now in the screen. I'm going to put a very big font, but if it's not readable, just let me know. So first thing is I'm going to do composer, create project, CakePHP app. And we are going to name the project CakeFest 24. Okay. So this is basically creating a new project, downloading the CakePHP app repo from GitHub, and then running the post install script, and obviously as well downloading all the dependencies using Composer. Now we have a blank new project in the CF24 folder. This project, as you can see, I'm going to use PHP Storm on this folder. I didn't see it. I didn't say it yet, but it's okay to stop me anytime and ask whatever you want. So.
What was the command? Composer create project and then?
Composer create project and you name it, whatever you want. I use CF24 because it's CakeFest 24, and I don't want to type things, so it's a shortcut. But you can name it as you want, or just leave it as app. That's fine as well. Good, so we have a blank new project created. It's a CakePHP application skeleton coming from GitHub, as we said just now. And the next step would be setting up a development environment that can be done using DDev. So DDev config. This is the command that will run DDev and generate a configuration for the project, okay? So it will ask for a project name. I'm going to use the default. Ask for a web relocation. I'm going to use the default. Auto detect the framework that is CakePHP. And you're good to go. Now you have a fully working, isolated development environment for this project. So tweaking this configuration a little bit, if you see there is a new folder, .ddev. In this new folder, you have a config.yaml file. And you can see here the main configurations you can tweak for CakePHP. In this case, the PHP version is correct for me, but I'm going to change the database to use MySQL. Okay. You can pick the database and version you want to use. There is a lot of other configuration that you can tweak and customize. I'm not going to get into details with this because this is a very basic setup. But if you have a non-basic setup, then you can use this tool to tweak whatever you need. So once you have this done, you can launch the development environment using DDev start. Okay, starting the containers. If you are, because you're in the Wi-Fi now, if it is the first time you use DDev, it will take some time to download the required containers. Good. So now we have everything in place. A couple things you can notice from the setup is we have HTTPS configured in our local environment by default, so we don't need to handle that. We have two URLs that we can use to access the site, one using localhost and a port, and another one with a fake domain name. Those domain names are configured in your browser using nkcert, but this is part of the DDEV configuration. When you set up DDEV for the first time, there is a command you need to run in case you want to have out-of-the-box SSL configured in your local environment. So if you open the site, you will see that we have a CakePHP 5 working environment. It's here, loaded in the cf24.ddev.site, and everything is green. Everything is green because CakePHP was auto-detected, and there is a custom configuration that was injected into CakePHP to make it work properly with the database and the rest of the references. So this is actually a plugin that was contributed by Alejandro there in the back to DDEV a couple months ago. So if you look at the configuration, you will see here in your project that you have a config folder, and this .env is configured for you by DDEV. This is basically what makes everything wired together, so you can have access to the database out of the box, and the rest of the basic configurations for CakePHP, like the security salt and so forth, right? Actually, it's using the safe TLD, but we might need to force enable a debug kit later. We can see that in a bit. So what I'm talking about is once you have your CakePHP application up and running, the next thing you probably want to do is to have debug kit enabled. In this case, debug kit is not here yet. So I'm going to tweak the configuration in the app local to force enable debug kit, which is around here. Actually, you won't have this problem if you use the localhost link, which is another option. DDEV should be around somewhere in the back. But let me enable that. One sec. Okay, so I'm going to do debug kit. Okay, so now we have DDEV. Now we have debug kit running. This is going to be useful later, possibly. So it's good to have it for development. Great. So that's it. I mean, this is 12 minutes project setup for CakePHP. Okay, and explained. So if you do it without explanation, it could be like 2 minutes. Good. Any questions? Nope. Excellent. So this is the DDEV configuration we already did. Another thing I usually do, even if you can access the database via console, because later we will want, we will want to see the contents of the database or do something in the database by hand. So you have a couple commands that you can use, like DDEV MySQL, right? Getting into the database right away. But if you prefer, if you're in a workshop and you don't want to use the console, maybe it's more appealing to install phpMyAdmin. DDEV is shipped with a list of plugins that you can install. Put this bigger. Okay, and one of the plugins is phpMyAdmin, this one. So I'm going to do DDEV get that, and then DDEV restart. So we can have phpMyAdmin in place. There are some other plugins, and actually there is a local email relay server that comes installed by default and configured. So when you send email from CakePHP, it will go to that local relay server. Sorry. Great, so now we have the dev PHP myadmin. Which will show you an empty database because we have nothing yet, right? The database DB has nothing, right? We are going to import a database into it. And we also have a ddev launch to launch the project. And we also have ddev launch -m to launch the MailPit server where you collect all the emails that you send using the application in case you send emails. We are not going to send emails today, but great. So that's it. ddev config done. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to use some example database so we can build or bake an application around it, and then use the report builder plugin that we are going to create today to actually report on some data. So I created some fake data using this database. You have the file here. CakeFest. So if you want to import this file, you can use PHP myadmin or the command line if you want, whatever. I'm going to download the file first, like this. And then I'm going to use ddev import db. And the name of the database is db.sql. So I get the database imported. I can go now to PHP myadmin and refresh the page, and you see this is going to be the example application we're going to use to play with today. So this example application is actually a subset of the tables from Redmine. Redmine is a ticketing system we use and our clients don't like. So nobody understands what's going on there inside. But we still use it, and it kind of works for us. So we keep using it, and we are resilient with Redmine. So this is a very small subset of tables. We have issues and projects and time entries. Basically, these three tables are the ones that I'm going to use as an example today for reporting, right? And the first thing we're going to do is we are going to actually bake an admin prefix set of CRUDs for my application using this command. We're going to bake everything, and we're going to use an admin prefix. So we have that protected under the /admin path, right? This is the command we're going to use now. So how can I run commands in my development environment? I can either go here and do ddev exec, for example, or I can do ddev cake and run cake right away. Or I can do ddev ssh and then get into the container, and then inside do whatever you want, right? So you can pick the flavor you want to use. I usually like to get into the container, just that, and then I'm gonna bake all the tables with a prefix admin, right? So this command will go to the database that is already connected, read all the tables, generate the table class, the entity class, controllers, templates, etc., everything, right? And set it everything inside of an admin prefix. Is anyone here not familiar with prefixes in routing? Everybody's familiar with it? Okay. So I'm not going to take time here explain that then, and what I'm going to do is just to fix the routes for prefixes, because the admin prefix is not set up out of the box when you create the application from scratch, and those controllers are not accessible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my configuration, my application configuration. I'm going to go to the routes configuration, and I'm going to create a routing for the prefixes I just created. Basically, if you see, I'm going to use this chunk of code to define a prefix admin, which is the same we just created. And then this builder fallbacks is going to create a number of routes to match, using conventions to match the name of the controller with the controller and index, edit, view, delete, etc. So I'm going to do that here. There, for example. Good. Sorry, it should be outside. Okay, so now we have an admin prefix, meaning if we go to the application and we try for admin projects, we should go to the projects, right? This is the basic CRUD CakePHP is generating for the projects. No mysteries here. You're possibly already familiar with this, so I'm not going to stop and explain. But the difference in this case is that we opted for an admin prefix because those CRUDs in the future, we don't want them to be accessible, or we want them to be accessible in development, and we want a quick way to remove them in the future. Maybe we want to have that for some time while we develop a project, to have the CRUDs for manual editing the tables or so. And then in the future, we are not planning to have CRUDs at all. And this is a convenient way to have them all in the same place so you can delete them in the future. So, yeah. Coming for the next step would be, well, we already configured the application, discussed about the dev init, imported the database, and then baked everything. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna bake a new plugin. So the intention of the workshop is to work mostly inside of the plugin folder for it, and we're gonna try that the plugin is gonna be as generic as possible without being production grade. I mean, we are not aiming to release this plugin, so some of the things are not going to be done in a configurable way, which is what you usually need to think about when you release a plugin for the public, right? But at least we will try to use dependencies only from inside of the plugin, and we'll also try to reduce interactions with the main applications as much as possible, right? So first, about plugins in CakePHP. If you are not aware of this resource, you should go and check it out, which is the awesome CakePHP list. Just as a matter of remembering that this is a very valuable resource for everybody working with CakePHP, because it is a curated list of plugins that you can search. So usually when you need something for your application, you can go to this page and search for it. Oh, I want slugs. Oh, there are 2 plugins for slugs. So I can go check one of these 2 and select the one I would like to use. We're going to use this one later, by the way. So yeah, it's a valuable resource in case you were not aware of that one. Then for plugin setup and configuration, we will set up the slug plugin later today. So we will have some some example to do the setup. So we're going to talk now about the report builder, which is the plugin we're going to build today. It's going to be Basically, these are going to be a couple screenshots of the plugin that we want to build. So you can have an idea of what's going to be, what we're going to do. We are going to have an index with all the reports we have in the system. We will be able to create a new report. We will be able to edit the associations of a given report. So when you create a new report, you see we are going to use a starting table. So we're going to use a starting table existing in the application, and then we are going to inspect that table and pull all the associations to that table so we can define what associations we want to contain into the report, right? And then we will also be, we are also going to navigate those associations. So it's going to be like a tree that you click and go down all the associations needed, so you can contain recursively the associations into the report. Once you define the associations, you will be able to select the columns you want to put on the report based on the associations you just selected. And then the last part of the workshop will be dealing with filters in the report. We are going to use only the main table for now to filter, because we could extend that easily to use all the belongs to associations, but for now we are going to use the main table to add filters to the report, and we are going to create 2 types of filters, and if we have the time, a third type of filter that will handle filtering by association. The 2 types of filters we're going to work with are going to be integer filters, like this one here, and date filters. We are going to use relative dates, like this week, this month, last month, right? So you can actually create filters for a given report and then execute the query, and the query will manage all those filters and run everything, run the contain, select the columns, apply the filters, and provide a result. And the result is going to be something like this, which is going to be the set of the columns and the data for everything, applying all the filters you want to go. Okay, so that's it. Let's go. First thing we're going to do is to bake a new plugin, which is going to be the report builder. Let's do that. We're going to bake the report builder plugin. So, not that. It's my fault. Yeah. I can actually do this. Okay, much better. So we're going to build a report. We're going to build a report builder plugin, and using the bake command, it's basically generating a bunch of files. Sorry, my voice is not very well today. Good. So now we have a structure for the report builder. If you look at your project, you have a new folder here on the top under plugins, plugins, report builder. You can see for CakePHP, sorry. Okay, so you can see for the CakePHP plugins, the structure is similar to the main application. So you can see there is a source folder, tests, web root. Inside of the source, you can add additional controllers, additional models, tables, entities, etc. All these things are going to be reusable into different different applications. When you create an application plugin, which is like this, you will see that the plugin is actually created inside of the structure of the application. That is usually the first step. Once you have your plugin polished, you can think about extracting all the files and putting that in an external repo, and then share the repo in GitHub so others can download your plugin and use it, right? In that case, in this case, this plugin will live here inside of the plugins folder because we have no intention to share the plugin with others, but also the plugins folder inside of an application can be used to split and isolate your existing application. So a bigger application can be split into smaller concept or smaller packages that you handle in isolation inside of the application. So the plugin is not only for reusability, it is also for maintainability of your code. So if you have for example, if you have an invoicing area in your application and you feel that this is becoming too big, or you want to split it because you want to assign this work to some group of developers or some developer, then you can use the plugin as a concept to apply that strategy and say, okay, I'm going to create an invoicing or an invoices plugin, and I'm going to do everything related with invoices there inside. Okay. Sorry about that. So we have a new plugin created, and our next step is going to be tweak routes and the initial configuration for the plugin, because when you create a plugin, you can see there is inside of the source, there is a main plugin file. This plugin file will help you to tweak how the plugin is going to be integrated into your application and define some defaults. Some of the defaults you can define, for example, you can define a customized bootstrapping and also routes. In my case, I'm going to change the routing. Instead of report builder, which is too long, I'm going to use RB, okay? Just for typing less during the session. And also another thing you can do with the plugin is to inject middlewares or additional middlewares into your main application, which is useful for configuration. Right? So how can we start with the development of the plugin? We're going to start with a migration because we want to define new tables to store the reports that we are going to create. So this is what we are going to do. Let me go to the notes. You can see here, yeah, we fixed the path. And now we are going to make an initial migration for my plugin, like this. So I'm going to bake an initial migration for the report builder. So you can see I can pass a parameter plugin to the bake migration to generate the migration inside of the plugin instead of outside. Some people like this, some other people doesn't like it to generate migrations inside of plugins. We in CakeDC, what we actually do is to, when we use a plugin inside of an application, we copy the migrations from inside of the plugin to the main application. So when the migrations are run, we don't need to remember to run migrations from specific plugins, but we run migrations for the whole application, and it works and saves a lot of time in development. So other people use this migrate script, for example, in the root of the project, so they remember when they need to run migrations, because sometimes the order is important. So you run migrate shell script, for example, and then you run migrations for the application, or for plugin 1, plugin 2, plugin 3, whatever, right? Doesn't matter. So you can pick your own method to don't forget to run migrations, because it's not going to work. So this is a new blank migration we just created inside of the plugin. So you can go to migrations, initial, and we're going to create the first table we want to have in our plugin. So if we follow the notes, we're going to create a new table, and the table is going to be RB_reports. Usually when we work with plugins, and the plugins need specific assets, or in this case, tables, it is important that we aim not to collide with maybe existing tables in the main application, right? So one method is prefixing the tables. I typically opt for adding a small prefix using the name of the plugin to every table we create, so you don't have problems with future applications maybe having a reports table already, right? So I'm going to create a reports table with 3 columns: name, created, and modified. And then I'm going to save the migration like this. So running this migration will create a new table, right? So let's do that. I'm gonna do bean, cake, migrations, migrate, plugin, report builder. And it executed the migration correctly. You see here the migration executed and the timestamp, the time used, etc. And now if you go to the database, you will see here that we have a new table, RB reports, which is empty and has only a name. Okay, not a big deal, but it's a process, right? So I wanted to show like starting with something and then increasing it later. So we start with a report who has a name. The next thing we're gonna do is bake tables, bake everything for that report. Let me show you here the command, because in this case, I don't need this. In this case, we have a particular case, which is we want to create a table for we want to create a table class for a table with a different name. I don't want my table to be called RB reports. It's I want them to be named as reports, right? So I can use this customization in Bake, so you can actually pass the name of the table here, right? And then the name of the table class you want to use. So if we do it this way, we are going to be able to bake a new table, which is going to be called reports instead of RB reports. So if you go there, you will have a new table, an entity, and you see the table is baked correctly to use set table RB reports. Okay. So this is the first thing we're going to bake. The second thing we're going to bake is going to be a controller for it, then templates for it, and then see what happens. Now we have a controller and templates. So now my reports can be accessible using the site RB, which is the path we configured for the report builder plugin, and then reports, which is the name of the controller. That's it. If I want to create a new report, we only have a name. So we not only want a name, we also want a starting table. So now we want, or we need to refactor the table, add a new migration, and add a new column. So let's do that. I'm going to create a new migration. And the new migration will have this content to create a new column to my reports table. Right? So for the RB reports table, we are creating a new column, starting table. I'm going to run the migration and get it done. So after running it, if you see, you won't have it here because we would need to rebake the templates for it. So we can just rebake everything. We are at the beginning of the project, so I can change the table and the controller and the templates. So now we get a name and the starting table. Good. Actually, we should be able to save this, like a test, and submit, and we have this. Okay. It's doing nothing, so we're going to do something now. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a bit of validation to the report, because we don't want to put everything in the starting table. We want to actually ensure that the table exists, right? So we don't start with a table that does not exist in our application. So this is the next step we're gonna do. I'm gonna grab this code to add validation for the new column we added, the starting table. If you look at the reports table, you see here in the method validation default, this is the set of rules that we are going to use to validate the data before it gets saved, actually when the new entity is created or patched, right? So you see validation rules are methods. We have a wide range of methods in the validator that you can explore following this class, for example. This is a big class here with a lot of different methods like not alphanumeric, ASCII alphanumeric, and credit card, and so forth, right? A lot of different validations you can use for your tables. So the default configuration for the validation methods is starting with the name of the column you want to validate. So this method, for example, could be read as the name has a max length of 255, right? We are going to create a new validation method for the starting table. So I'm going to put the new method here. Obviously, we need to import this class. And this validation method is a custom validation method that allows you to first name it whatever you want, and then in the rule option you can pass a function which is a custom validation that will be executed when the starting table column is validated. This function will have a value. The value will be whatever you put in the form, right? Whatever you put in the value you put in the form, actually. And then you have a context, which is going to be a number of other details that you can use for validating, like the rest of the form and some other data. So in this case, what we are going to try and do is to fetch the table with that value and capture an exception, because if the table does not exist, we will get an exception, and this exception means that the table is not found, right? The only change we need to add to this code to make it work is to ensure that the fetch table is available. Fetch table is a very useful method. We're going to use it quite a lot today. That comes from the locator aware trait. Use locator, right? So if you use this trait, you will have a number of methods available in that class. One of the methods available is fetch table. Good, so now we have some validation to this column. So if we try to add here a new report, and we name it test and bananas, it could not be saved because we don't have a bananas table, right? If we change it and use projects, then all good, because we have a projects table. Good, so that's a minimum validation we created for the report, right? to be sure that the table exists. So the next thing we're going to do is going to be matching with the first portion of the report builder, which is navigating and selecting associations so we can contain those associations into the report later on. To do that, we are going to use a little bit of JavaScript, and we're going to pull the associations and render the associations in a, it's not a tree, it's similar to a tree structure, right? Because we're not going to use specifically tree controls, but it will look like a tree, right? I'm trying not to use a lot of HTML and JavaScript in the workshop, but that's the reason that everything is going to look so ugly. And also, I'm not a full stack developer. I'm not pretending to be, so I'm sorry. Good. So for navigating the associations, the first thing we need to do is to actually on save redirect to a new action that does not exist yet, right? Which is the one where we are going to create. So I'm going to go to the reports save controller, reports controller, save method, sorry, add method, of course. And after adding, instead of redirecting to the index, I'm going to redirect to edit associations, which is going to be a new method in the reports controller that we are going to create right now. I'm also going to pass the report ID, right, as a parameter. So, good. We are then going to add this new method, edit associations, that is going to be in the reports controller. I'm going to use this one here and this one here. And let me explain what happens. So the reports controller, around the end of it, I'm going to create two actions. First action is going to be edit associations, which is going to accept an ID as an integer. Remember, from latest versions in CakePHP, you can actually type the arguments for an action, and CakePHP will convert that parameter automatically or fail if the parameter is not matching whatever you want to pass. In this case, I want an integer, so if I pass bananas again, it will fail because it is not an integer or cannot be converted into an integer. And then the second parameter is going to be optional, and it's going to be the association itself. We are going to store associations because associations can be nested. We're going to store the associations using the dot notation. So if we have a long nested association, it's going to be projects dot issues dot time entries dot whatever, right? So this is going to be a utility function that we are going to use later in our Ajax call. So I'm breaking the function in two: edit associations, which is going to be the get request non-Ajax, and navigate association that we are going to use for Ajax requests. The main difference about these two functions is using or not using the layout. You see here in line 109, view builder enable auto layout is called because in this action we want to use a layout. What is the layout? You see here in the templates, sorry, instead of the main application, templates, layout, default. So this is the default layout for all the templates in our CakePHP application. This layout is going to be rendered always, unless you tell Cake you don't want a layout. And one of the ways you can tell him that you don't want to render the layout is using the view builder option that we used before. Let me go there. In this case, we want to enable the layout because we disabled the layout in this other function. So basically, when I call this function, that is going to be intended for an Ajax backend rendering function, I don't want a layout. I just want the content, right? And if I call this function, I want a layout. So these all function navigate associations is going to be the same, and it's actually doing the whole work. So it's going to rely on the reports table to provide actually the associations that are that belong to a given table. If you see, when we create a report, the starting table column will hold the name of the table we want to start with. For example, projects, right? So the go-to association is a function that we are going to implement right now that will allow us to navigate from the starting table to any other table that is an association. So we can then build all the tree. And the rest of the function is basically passing variables to the view, the report, the current table, etc. We're passing everything to the template. And then in the case of an Ajax call, we are going to disable the layout, and in the other case, use the layout. So what do we need to do next? Now we have the controller actions. We still have to implement this function to go to an association, right? Which is what we are going to do next. So here in reports table, let me go there to reports table. We need a function to somehow ensure that whatever we're trying to navigate exists as an association. So I call this function go to association. We can pass an initial table, and we can pass an association, and it will return an array, being the array the current table we are in and all the associations it has. So for each level, we will be able to paint all the associations and then click and paint all the associations and then click and paint all the associations again, right? So we can navigate effectively all the associations for a given table. So this function is going to get the current table. Then it is going to use the text tokenize, which is a utility coming from the framework to split a string in tokens, right? You can use some other utility or PHP itself, but the text utility class is very, very useful. And I always like to showcase how it works in every workshop because I end up using it a lot. So for me, it's a beautiful utility to use in your projects. If you tokenize the association using the dot separator, you will get an array of all the associations for a given table, right? And for each one of those in the array, you can get the association for that current table and then return all the associations. Okay. So what else is missing? We have missing the template itself, or the templates, right? We have an edit association template that we need to create. So I'm going to get that done. So what would happen right now, right? If you go to the project, let me go there. I'm going to show you how it breaks, right? So if you go to the project and say test projects and save it, now you have a missing template, right? So as you can see, when you have debug enabled, CakePHP is very verbose with the error messages. In this case, it will help you to understand that, yeah, everything is right, but I don't have a default template for this action. So you need to go and create one, right? Actually, you need to create it here, which is what we are going to do, right? So if you go there, you can then go to the project and create this new file, which is going to be under report builder templates, edit associations. New file. Good. So the edit associations is going to do something similar we did for the action. It's going to do three things, right? First, it is going to, well, two things. Some h1 tag, and we're going to include the navigate associations element. So an element in CakePHP is an include, and it is very useful for composing on templating. So this element is actually doing the hard work on rendering the association contents. We're going to use it both from here and from the internal template that we are going to use in the Ajax call. So also, we want to use a JavaScript file. We're going to name it navigate associations, and we're going to use it in a block named script. What is this block? This block is a way to inject code in other places in your application view layer. In this case, the script block is a default block created in the layout. If you go to the layout, under here in the default layout, you will see there is a fetch line with the name script. This is the way CakePHP uses to declare a block. So in other places of your application, if you do assign or append or prepend, and you put the name of the block script, everything you put there inside is going to be injected into the layout. This is useful for scripts or for meta information or for composing. If you want to extend views, you can create a structure where views extend each other, and then you can flow the data from the last one to the previous one, right? So these are the three things we are doing here, right? We are using an element that we don't have yet, and we are using a script that we don't have yet. So let's create those two things. Actually, I'm going to create the other view, navigate associations, which is just going to render the element. Like this, and like this. We need a PHP tag here. Good. And now we need to create a navigate associations element, which is this one. Okay, so if you remember, we generated an array with all the associations for a given table that is stored in the table associations array. So we are actually navigating all the associations, and for each one of the associations, we are going to generate a link. So this link is going to be a navigate link that you can click and do something with JavaScript. So hooking this navigate link will be done using the class navigate that we are generating for each link. And then we are passing a data URL because best practice here is to ensure that all the URLs in your application are generating using the router. So if you have some code in JavaScript, best practice would be to generate the URL, if possible, from the backend using the router, and then passing this URL as a property or a variable to JavaScript to be used. So you don't need to handle those URLs in JavaScript, because then you can use the reverse routing facilities in CakePHP in the case of need in the future. If you need to change a URL, it's going to be propagated to the entire application. So the URL is built using the plugin report builder, controller reports, and action is navigate associations. This action does not exist, okay? But all good. Well, sorry, this action already exists because we created it. It's the second we created, right? So that's going to be the class navigate, and then we're going to put a tag on it. It's going to be a DD with the alias and the navigation link. Okay? So how is this going to look like? And I think we're ready to show. I think we are. So if we go to the project and reload edit associations, will be something like this, okay? It works. It doesn't work, right? Because you click and navigate and does nothing yet. But you see we have the association for the test report, and this is all the associations detected based on the associations that you have defined, right? It's not magic, but and when you click and navigate, you should see something happening, but not there yet. And what's the reason that is not working, actually? Oh, maybe the JavaScript is not there yet. Possibly that's the problem. Yeah. So yeah, we are missing a file, right? We should be able to see this in the console. Actually, let me show you. Because I want to be able to debug my errors. And let me reload this thing. I didn't add it yet. Oh, that's weird. So let's see. So this is missing, right? Navigate associations.as. Create the JavaScript file. Okay. And now this is a small chunk of JavaScript, basically linking the click action with the navigate class, detecting that when any link in the page that has the class navigate is clicked. So when that happens, this code is executed. This code is basically fetching a URL from the site and then getting the content of wherever it comes and injecting this content somewhere, right? Actually in a div right before the current element. That's what it does, right? I'm trying not to use any libraries or anything like that, just plain JavaScript, so hopefully it's more understandable or less understandable, but at least it is plain JavaScript. So then if we go back to the page and reload, now we're able to navigate. Basically, if you click on navigate for anything, let me use some more interesting table like issues, for example. So keep in mind you started the reporting projects, right? So you have projects, then you have issues, then issues have time entries, and then you could go to projects again, and then go to issues, and then go to time entries. Obviously, we are not detecting the cycles here, and this is not intended for today, but it should be a good idea to detect any cycles when you're doing that and just disable the button. Another thing we are not doing is making this proper, like disabling the button, the button once it is navigate. We're not doing UI, right? Just we have the right to not do UI today, so it's basically a way to navigate all the associations you have for a given table, members, and so forth, right? You can see what happens under the hood if you go to the network tab in your browser and click and navigate, and then see here in XHR, you see the request that is made to the server, right? The request is going to RB reports, navigate association, parent projects. So CakePHP will get these two things and convert them into the action parameters, input parameters, and then process the action and return this response. You see, the response return is actually HTML. So we are doing backend rendering, which is something that you may or may not need to do in your projects, because some other projects will always return JSON or return XML or whatever. But you can always do backend rendering and just use the chunk and put it in your use. There are a couple, for example, Inertia.js is doing a very good wiring with backend rendering and mixing backend and front-end rendering for good interaction. I will take a look at that project if you have some time. And but yeah, today the example was backend rendering via Ajax. So you can just grab whatever HTML and put it there in your view, right? Good. So excellent. We have associations. So what happens now? We can navigate, but we need to save them, right? We want to save associations in our project, so we need some kind of new table, right? I'm going to bake a new migration for it. I'm going to call it add association. And the add association will generate a new table. So add association here, and we're going to create this table, which is going to be RB associations. It's going to have a name. It's going to have a report ID because we belong to a report, and we're going to add a foreign key to the report ID to ensure when the report is deleted, all the associations are also deleted, because they make no sense for us to have them in a database if we don't have a report, right? So this is what we want to run. I'm going to migrate again. We have a new table. And now we want to save the association into the database. I'm going to bake the model for it. Okay. And one thing is we need to fix the association because bake won't do it for us. So if you see, we just baked a new table. So if you go to the table, model, table, associations table, you see the table will incorrectly belong to RB reports. We want to belong to reports, right? So the class name is also fixed to RB reports, and the other thing we need to fix is in the build rules, because the reference table is also RB reports. It should change to reports, because if not, it will fail. Like that. So now in reports controller, we are going to create an action for add an association, which is the next step. We can navigate the associations, but now we want to create a link to add that particular association. After we navigate, we want to add that one. So we are going to use a public add association method into the reports controller like this to save it. Reports controller. We are going to create an add association. So if we take a look at the method, add association is going to be a very simple method that is going to fetch the associations table. And then we are going to use the method find or create. This method is useful when you want to prevent duplicates, when you save things into the database. Find or create will first check if the row exists, and if the row does not exist, then it will try and save the row. So it will also happen inside of a transaction. So you ensure that you're not inserting duplicates, right? So find or create will try to save an association like this with the report ID and the name of the association you just clicked. If it is not saved, then the result is going to be a failure. If it is saved, then the result is going to be okay, and the message is going to be whatever. Congratulations. And then we're going to set some things to the view and basically force the output to be JSON. This is a way you can use in CakePHP to force the rendering of an action to use the JSON view class. Sometimes you want to create actions that are flexible, that could return HTML or could return XML or could return whatever. Sometimes you just want to return JSON and you want to actually force the action to only be returning JSON. This is a way to do it, using the view builder as the class name and fixing that for JSON. So anything returned in this action is going to be JSON, right? And also we are using the serialize option that is going to ensure that the JSON output will contain these two variables encoded, both the result and the message. So in Navigate Associations element, we're going to improve this element, adding also an add link, which is the missing part we had before in the edit associations.
Why can the association new? Find or create returns an object. Or
Find or create actually returns the result of saving this entity.
do we need the line 130?
130. Yeah, because it could fail. Maybe a validation error or a validation error. It could always fail. So if it fails, you will notice that and return an exception. It could also throw an exception, but then we go and through the error trap and other classes, right? Good. So, and actually, if I'm honest, this is eating my own dog food, because when I see a save operation in any place in the code, when I do a code review, my standard message in code review is, what if not saved? And I shrug, like, So, because validation can happen and maybe it's not saved. So you're counting with something that was not saved and you continue your operation. So.
Do we have a method find or create or fail or something?
Do we? I don't think so.
We should have.
Yeah, why not? Find or create or fail. But if you follow that approach, you need to add or fail to a lot of other things. So no, I think it could make sense in this case, or just here you can throw, right, whatever is needed as well. But
in each case, I should think about if not saved, do something.
right, exactly.
It is 100 places in the project.
Yeah, usually, but because this is a JSON method, do something usually means log the error and reply back a message or return a response with a specific code, like for example 5 or something or whatever, right? 40, in this case 404 maybe, because you're trying to because if the report ID is not there, maybe a 4 type of error because the report is not found. But if the association could not be saved, some other code that reflect that you tried to save and you were expecting a save operation to be okay, but it failed for some reason. The save operation could be failing for some other reasons, right? You don't know what happened there inside, a lock in the database or things, right? So yeah. Good. So we have a method to save. We have now we need to add the link to the navigate associations, so if you go to navigate associations, we will need to add, element. Associations element. This guy. I'm going to add a new link here, which is going to be the add link. Couple things to note in this case is the class is different because we're going to hook this class into another JavaScript event, and we're passing the data CSRF, which is needed because we are using the CSRF protection in this application, and if we don't pass it because this is going to be post action, it will fail because it will require the CSRF passed somehow, right? We have this CSRF token always available in the CSRF token in the request get attribute. So it is very easy when you generate a link from the backend to actually pass the CSRF token. Or some other projects do this with a generic approach, and they pass the CSRF token to a JavaScript variable, and then use the JavaScript variable in whatever framework you're using to handle the post or whatever. You need one. It doesn't matter how you pass it. And then this is the URL we're going to use. That, as you can see, the action is going to be add association. We're going to pass a report ID and the association. I think we already have it. So, but we need to change that to echo the new link, which is going to be around here. Like that. So we want to display the add link as well. And then we need a bit of JavaScript also to handle the event in a similar way than we did before with the navigate. So now we need to go to the JavaScript. Here. Sorry. And edit there, right? So it's similar approach. Any click we do, if it goes to an add association class type of link, we are going to fetch the URL we pass, but we are going to use a post instead of a get. And we are going to say, hey, this is going to be JSON, and this is going to be the CSRF token, right? So as an output, we are going to alert whatever comes from the backend in JSON. So we go there, we go there, and try. One interesting thing here. If you do this in your environment, maybe you refresh this page, the add button won't work. Good, it didn't work. Why? Because the JavaScript is being cached. So this is very annoying in development, especially when you're showing a demo to a client and you have him in the phone and you update a little thing in JavaScript and then deploy it. So you need to ensure that your assets are well managed, either by using a plugin like Asset Compress or similar ones, or by enabling this option here in the configuration that will help you a lot, that will save you a lot of headaches in app. It will go to your app local, obviously, but so you have the asset here, and you can basically enable timestamp to true, which means CakePHP will take extra time. This is not for production, not for production. CakePHP will use extra time to calculate the last modified time for each asset and then append that as a query string. So basically, if you change the asset, the URL will be different and the browser will never cache, right? So if you change this, you will ensure that every time you refresh, all the assets are going to be fresh. So, you know, we all developers have this tick of Control F5, F5, Shift F5, and do 3-4 things to refresh. This is not needed anymore. So then you can navigate whatever association you want to do. For example, issues and time entries, and you now can add the time entry. You get the result from the backend, and then you can check that effectively the association was saved. So you go to associations. There it is. Okay, so this is the second example using Ajax. In this case, we are returning a JSON. And we are not rendering anything in the backend. We are rendering in the front end. Good. So add a validation for associations added. We can do that. This is very quick to do because we just need to add this code to the associations table. Because we don't want to save an association that does not exist, right? So because we already have the go-to association method available, we can use that method to check when we save an association that the association is valid. Because a hacker could try to inject an invalid association for some reason. We don't want that. Oh, we also need a fetch table here, so we need to use locator aware trait. So if you follow the method, it's going to be similar to the validation method we added. In this case, I'm adding this method to show that sometimes the validation method will hit the database. Why not? Because in this case, we need to check, we need to fetch the table, we need to fetch the current report to check or to have the starting table. So the validation method is actually hitting the database and retrieving data from another table. And you're using those objects to ensure that the go-to validation with the value is correct. If not, then you fail and return false. We will never see this because we are crafting those associations by code. So every time we generate an add link, the association name exists because it's crafted, right? I'm not going to test the other case. Okay, so let me go there. So for the next slide here, what we're going to do is actually select the columns. You remember this huge list of checklists with all the columns that you can check and select which columns you want to save. We're going to select all these columns and store the columns in the database. So to do that, one way we could think about is how to store the checked columns in the database. We could create another table and call it columns or check columns, right? And every time you check, when you save that record in table, similar to what we did for the associations. But that wouldn't be new for the workshop today, so I decided to use a new database type, which is basically we're going to create a comma-separated database type, allowing us to store an array into the database as comma-separated, and then retrieve it from the database as an array. This is going to be done transparently for you by CakePHP once you define the type. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new database type which is going to be this one. For database types, you have this reference page in the book. Right? It's talking about a JSON type. Actually, the JSON type is implemented in the core, and we are going to use it today. But you get an idea of how to map a new or an existing type and how to use it from a given table. So once you wire those types and set the column type as the type you just created, CakePHP will use specific methods when you try to save to the database and when you retrieve the data again from the database. We're going to use that approach to create a comma-separated type that we are going to create in the database type, comma-separated. Source, new file. Okay. So we have comma-separated type, which is extending the base type. You don't need to, but because there is an interface as well. There is a method toPHP. This method is used by the framework when something is coming from the database. So if it is coming from the database, it will pass through this method. Basically, what we are going to do is to explode the comma. So we are actually returning an array or null. That could be array or null, whatever. Then we will have methods for marshalling and for toDatabase and also for toStatement when a statement needs to be generated in the ORM for querying that table. So it's going to be either a null or a string, right? So once you create the type, next thing you need to do is to ensure that the type is defined. Adding this line in Bootstrap, so CakePHP is aware of the type exists in config Bootstrap. Around the end of the file, you can put you can map. This actually is whatever name you want to define for it, and then the class name we just created.
Can we place it in Bootstrap plugin?
Yeah, let's try that. Plugins config, no, in source, it's here. So my only concern is that when the only concern there would be if the table is loaded or data is coming, this line should be executed before the get schema on the table is executed. That's my only concern of putting it here, but let's try and see what happens. So we're going to use the comma separated, and then the next thing we need to do is basically create a migration to store the comma separated values for the columns. Keep in mind we have two tables. We have the starting table and we have the associations. So we're going to create starting table columns and table columns for the associations. I'm not using the word columns because it is a reserved word for MySQL and it's going to be a pain. So I'm trying to, I would recommend you to not do that. So that's a new migration we need to create. I'm going to bake it. The calls at calls. Those are the two columns we want to create. The type is going to be text in case we want to store a lot of columns, right? Just in case. So I'm gonna migrate again. Two columns are created. And now we need to ensure those columns are defined correctly so Cake will honor that new association, that new type, sorry. So first, into the associations entity and report entity, we need to include this into the accessible fields. This is something I usually forget, and it takes a while until I notice. Source, entity, association. So the accessible is a security feature of a framework, preventing or allowing the data to be patched from the user land. So if it is not here, if you try to save it, when you patch the entity, it's not there, so CakePHP will not honor that column or field, and it won't be saved. So you need to remember adding the accessible here and adding the other one here. Starting table columns. There it is. Good. And what? Okay. Starting table columns. And now we need to touch the tables to ensure the type is linked to the column. So we're going to touch the associations table first. Here we need to add a new method. Around here to import this class. So the get schema method in the table provides CakePHP with an entry point to tweak how the schema is going to be retrieved for the given table. If you don't provide a get schema, CakePHP will go and inspect the table, describe the table, get all the columns and use them. Usually cache them internally, so you don't need to do that on every query. So the get schema also allows you to modify or add types to specific columns like this one. In this case, we are setting a column type, table columns as comma separated, which is the type we just defined, right? So from now on, this is going to be the type for this column, and those methods that we created inside of the type will be in effect. The same with the other one, right? In the reports table, we have a way to get to the reports table. And put the schema in it. It's the same, right? In this case, the column name is different, but same method. So now, in edit associations, we need to generate an action to actually display the associations. Sorry, display the columns. Check on the columns and click on submit to save, right? But we want to first create a link in edit associations. Around here, right? This time, instead of using the regular URL build or HTML link, I'm using the link from path, which is a way to generate links using a string path like this to create those links. And the string path is like plugin name, controller name, action name. Right? If it is a more compact way of, instead of having an array, you can use this one. And then you can pass an array with parameters you want to pass to it. So what is this doing is basically after the edit association, we're going to have a continue link here that will go to the columns, right? To select the columns, which is an action that does not exist yet. So we are going to create it in reports controller. We're going to create the select columns. Okay, so the select columns method will get the report ID as an input parameter or argument. It's gonna get the report from the database containing all the associations, and then it is going to, if it is a post, it is going to save the association columns for that given report, right? I'm dying here because we don't want to continue to the edit filters. We want to see the output of whatever was saved, okay? DD is for debug and die. Then we go to the reports controller and create a select columns here. Sorry, we just did it. And we are missing the template, right? So we create a new template for select columns that will list all the columns. So I'll create a new file. And I'm gonna put all of that. So this select columns template will basically use the all columns from inside the report entity to bring all the associations using name and columns. And then for each one, for each column, it will display a control. This string replace here exists because we don't want to use dots in the form, because using dots in the form control have a specific meaning for an association, and if we use it, CakePHP will understand that we are talking about an association and we are not talking about an association right now. We're talking about a string, right? So this is going to be a checkbox with the column as a label. That's all. So the last piece of magic in this file is how this all columns will work, right? This is actually a method that we need to create that is going to be an entity accessor. The entity accessor is a method you can use as a utility or for data providing or some other usages that is going to be used by CakePHP as if it was a column coming from the database. It is not a column coming from the database, but when you access the entity and you use that method, for example, all columns, this function will be executed. This is useful for data manipulation coming from a database or small utilities like this one to retrieve all the columns, for example. So if you go to the report entity, and create the method, accessors always are protected function underscore get, and then whatever name of a column you want to use. In this case, we have no parameters and we return an array. So we need the locator aware trait again. Like this, so we have access to the fetch table. And then you see we are fetching the table and getting the schema of the table and then getting all the columns for that table. So that's all the trick. And then for all the associations, we are using the method that we created to go to the association, and then the same way, we are also retrieving all the columns for the association. So we will have an array with the main table or the starting table, the first element with all the columns, and then all the associations inside of the array with all the columns. So we can display everything in a very ugly way. So this is returning all the columns like that. And I think it is gonna be enough for display. So we can go to here, select column. Oh, associations is not, oh, we are missing one step because reports needs to define an association to associations. So reports table.
Is there a command to rebake the table?
No. No, but you can use git. If you git add, init and add and bake again, and then pull the diffs of whatever happened and store some of what changed.
But if you have already changes, then you have to commit it and then bake it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you don't need to commit. You can add and then compare with the head and stuff. But at some point in the project, you stop baking things, I guess. So you bake the new stuff, but the old stuff you just go and tweak it manually. So we need an association missing here. So these belong reports table. Reports. This is has many, right? Has many. Actually, I don't have that code, but it should be like associations. Then set class name. And I think that's it. That should do it. Replace strategy. I think there was a strategy replace somewhere. Let me look at the code. So workshop. Source. Table. Reports. Dependent. Okay. So I'm going to pull this one. Okay. So this is the association defined. So now we can retrieve using the contain. And we get all the columns, right? So those are the columns for the projects table. And then if you go down, you get a column for the time entries. So you can then check, whatever is needed. It's not going to be saved because we don't have the action yet, right? But we're going to create the action in a second. So we go there and look for the save association columns. In reports table. Right. So we need to add the new method for save association columns in the reports table. Table. Save association columns. And check columns. So the save association columns will basically check if the column is checked, right? And retrieve the association by name and ensure the check columns is updated for each association, setting the association as dirty. So when you set an association as dirty and you save the main association, you're gonna save also the associated table, right? So if you don't set it to, that's gonna be a problem because you would need to save it manually. So you're gonna save it, and then the check columns is basically checking if the column is checked or not. We're checking it using the collection class. So the objective here is to show you one of the possible uses of the collection class. In this case, we are using the collection class in CakePHP to filter all the values that are 1 and then return the array as a result. So instead of using native PHP functions, we are using the beautiful collection class in CakePHP to do that filter. Okay, very useful. Good, so the last thing we need is to define the getAssociationByName function inside of the report entity, like this. So we go to the report entity and define a new utility function like this. So this utility function you will pass an association name and it will return the association inside of the report associations. So for each one, if the name is the association name, return it. If not, return null, right? Wow. So we have a way now to retrieve the association, assign the array of new columns, and save it to the database. I'm going to try and do it. Actually, I can reload this page and should do it. Okay, so this is, remember we died at this point. This is the saved entity report. You see we have one association and the table columns is like this. If you see the table columns type is an array, is not a string, because that type is the comma separated type, and we defined that the toPHP was returning an array. You can return any object or class in your, actually any object in your application if you want to. So you can define complex types that are saved into the database and then retrieved in your application, right? And you manage those types as an array. It's very convenient. So now if you click on ID, name, description, for example, and create a twig gmount, whatever, you see that the starting table columns is going to be this, and the association is going to be that, right? So you will be able to save the columns now. So the next step in the workshop today will be to run the report and then to add a widget for filters, right? So if you remember in the first part of the workshop, sorry, the first part of the workshop we created a way to add a new report. When you add a new report, you can select a name for it, test2, and a starting table, like issues. Then you can navigate and add any associations to the report you want, then continue, check and select the columns you want to use for each one of the associations and save everything into the database. So the next step we're going to follow is to actually run the report and get some data from the database based on the details we have right now on the report. And the next step we're going to do is we're going to create a filter. We are running a bit low on time, so I'm going to ask you for which one of the filters you want to create. I think the best one will be relative dates, but you tell me, right? So next step would be, if you go to the run the report, we need to create a new link in the reports index to trigger the action. So if you go to the here, first of all, before moving forward, there was a question in YouTube about how can you use an element from inside of the plugin coming from the application. So there is actually no restriction on using the templates, or in this case the elements from inside of a plugin coming from the application. The point is, CakePHP has number of places that is defined in the app configuration, and those places is where are the prefixes of all the paths that CakePHP will use to try to find a given template or element. So if it will, for example, if you're inside of a plugin, CakePHP will try to find the element name first inside of the plugin. If it is not found, it will use that array of places to go and find an element with that name. This configuration is something you can override in your own application. Actually, we did that a number of times, for example, in the case of themes. Because if you think, when you use a theme in your application, the theme is the last thing that CakePHP will use to grab a given template. So if you want to override a theme, sometimes it's useful to add another path with another location, like for example a second theme, right? You have, for example, Bootstrap whatever theme, and then for a given client you want to just modify a couple things. So you don't want to fork the entire theme or something. You just create a new plugin with a couple modifications in JavaScript or CSS or whatever, and then you change the order of the paths that CakePHP will use to retrieve the assets, or the templates in this case. That's useful and prevents you to do a lot of manipulation on on the theme itself, right? Good. So if you remember, what we are going to do now is to run the report. So we are going to first add a link to it into the index template. So we go to the reports, index, PHP, not this one. This one. So we will have a run action created as well. So we're going to have a run action that is going to be like this. So when we go to the index of the reports, we're going to have this new link here created. And now we're going to create an action to actually run the report. In reports controller, we're going to create this action, run. And this is going to be around here. So what this run action is going to do is nothing. Basically call the model layer for a run function. This is actually one of the CakePHP best practices, which is thin controllers and fat models. So anything you can do in the model layer, do it in the model layer. Don't do it in the controller. So the report is going to run the run action that we need to create in the reports table. So we go to the reports table. We're going to use these two functions. The first one, run, will get a report as a parameter and will return an array. This array is going to be an array of data. We will talk about this later because we are going to paginate the results, right? Because maybe you have 10 million rows, so you don't want to return 10 million rows in an array, right? So what we are going to do is to fetch the table, the starting table, generate a query for the starting table, and then add all the contain to this query, disable hydration. That means we don't need objects returned, we don't need entities marshaled, we just need an array of data because we're going to show that in the screen. And then we change that into an array. And then the add contain is also an easy function because of the way we built and saved the associations before. For all the associations, we are going to call contain on the association, right? And then we return a query. That's going to be for the table. And then we need a template for the run. So this is what we're going to create. Yes?
Just in the content association name,
Mm-hmm.
is there a way to easily check that the association still exists here? Because we checked in the form with the validator that the association was existing, but maybe it has been deleted or renamed. So is there a way here?
Of course, yes. You could use actually the same approach as we did for the validation. So if you remember, and you do, if you go here to the validation, we have this function here. We could actually extract this function, right? Or first you could call the whole validation, but it will validate all the things that maybe you don't want, right? So it will be something like protected function association exists, right? And association exists will return a boolean, and depending on this logic, like that, right? And then this is a string, and then here we call right? And then we can reuse that function from here. And for example, throw an exception, right? Okay.
Does contain method if association doesn't exist?
That's a good question. Possibly throw in an exception. But now we throw the exception we want.
Yeah.
So, okay, so that would add the contain, prepare the query with the contained data. We need to use the run or add the run template, which is going to be around here. Around here. Okay. So this run method is basically going to create a couple styles to collapse the headers of the table, because we're going to display rows with data, and then when you click on the data, it's going to expand the contents. And then this JavaScript is going to do just that. expand all the contents because we want to display the main table and then below all the associations. And then we're gonna use a helper to display the rows. Helpers in CakePHP will allow you to group and define when you have a lot of PHP code in your templates. So this is a proper way to do that because the report row is going to be a lot of PHP. So we decided to create a helper for that. And creating a helper, you can bake it actually. You can bake helper report helper, and inside of the plugin report builder, and get a new helper skeleton for you, and then update the code in the helper to display a row. Actually, I have all the code, so I'm gonna just replace it right away. So the helper class will be created under view, helper, report helper, and you can create the code to display a row. If you take a look at the code here, basically for the row, we are gonna split into the row data and the row data that is nested. This is associations. And then for each one, for the nested, we are gonna do a distinction to display when it is a belongs to data, and if it is not a belongs to data, we're gonna call recursively the row function, because we can nest any amount of levels deep. And all the HTML is going to be generated into this nested row HTML variable that we can then display later around here. So this helper is going to generate based on the rows that are coming from the database. Keep in mind, when you pull the data from the database, you will get the main table data and then arrays with all the associations and then more arrays inside. This code here will basically iterate all this structure and generate the output that we are going to present in the screen with the detail of the collapsing on the top. Which means now if we go here and try to run this one, association not found. Something happened. In add contain, that validation is not working because the association should be found. Let me check that. First, I'm gonna do this and see what happens. So the association is found. So something I did wrong in the validation. So here, let's fix that. So if not validate association exists, so I'm trying to fetch a table with a value. On the value is the association name. This is not the value we need to use, right? Because on the validation default, this is only for the starting table. Yeah, this is not, we need to use the other function. We have navigate association to first navigate the association and then call this one. So this is not a valid approach to what I did. Validate association exists will be renamed to validate table exists. Right? And then first I need to here I need to go to the association first. So these where is that? In go to association was the name. Go to association. What is the initial table? The initial table will be the report starting table, and the association will be the association. Good. So if you remember, this will return an array with the initial table and the association, and return the current table and the associations. We just need the current table. So we need something like this. For the current table, and validate association will be for the current table. The current table, and it is actually validate table exists. That should work. No. Table exists, type a string, has many given. Ah, okay. Because this is not current table, this is current table, get alias, maybe? Yeah, that works. Okay. So first you need to navigate the association and then get the last one, and then the last one check that it's a valid table, right? But that's the output of the report. You see we are missing the headers that I don't think we will have time today to add, but we are able to navigate all the main table and all the associations below, right? Display can be improved, like a lot, but what we are going to do, I think, with the last half an hour we have is to work on the widgets and the filters that I think is more interesting than working with HTML itself. So good, we have a report. We can also add the selected columns to the report. I think that's a quick step we need to do in order to filter properly. I'm going to do it quickly. You see in reports table, run contain. So the run and the add contain need to change. And this is to ensure that we take into consideration the columns that we checked before, right? So when you run the report, we are adding an extra step, add select here, that will basically use for all the associations and contain the associations, but instead pass a fields value to all the contain, so we can only retrieve the columns we want. The problem with this approach is that if you don't select specific columns, like the foreign key columns in some associations, the query will fail. But that is up to you. If you retrieve projects and issues and you don't select project ID from the issue, the query will fail, right? No problem. And then the same with the add select for the main table. For the main table, instead of using contain, what we are going to do is that we are going to actually check that the selected columns exist in the table, and if they exist, use them in the select. This is the only thing I would like to comment here is the usage of alias field. Use alias field always if you want, if you can, because it will prevent issues when you're running the query in the future. In the case of the column is duplicated, maybe you're trying to retrieve an ID and the ID is present in 2 or 3 tables, you will get a database error because of the query being executed, because this column is ambiguous. So using alias field all the time will prevent this type of errors. Good, so now if you run the report again, yep, that's a problem, right? time entries issue ID is required. So I need to ensure that time entries issue ID. I'm actually going to create a new report. I'm going to say issues 2 issues, and I'm going to add projects to it. So then if I get the issue ID and the project ID and the subject, and then here the project, I'm going to get ID and name. Okay, I got it. So if I go there and run it, now you see we are only retrieving the columns that we selected, the IDs and the description of the issue, right? Good so far. So next thing would be talking about widgets and filters. So we're gonna add a couple filters if we have the time. I think we have time. If you, unless you think otherwise, adding the filter for integers is very simple. I think we need to start with the integers, and then we can, if we have time, we add the relative dates, right? And that, I think, will cover the 20 minutes we have, unless you have any questions, or would you like me to cover anything else, right? But if not, I think we're good on time for that. So I'm gonna, first I'm gonna create a quick migration to store the filters, actually. I'm going to use a JSON type for it. Big migration, add filters. So I'm gonna add the filters to here. If you see, there is a things type for JSON, and also when it's created as JSON, CakePHP will recognize the type as well, so all good. We need to run the migration. Nope. That. Good. And then in reports controller, I need to add a new function for editing the filters and remove the die we left before. So I'm gonna reports controller. I'm gonna add the filter. Right, the edit filters will basically get all the type map for the table, and we will display the type map. So in the form you will see is basically all the columns that the table has, and then the filter will be based on the type of the column. For now, we are going to use only integers, so you only will see integer columns when you're going to filter. So this is, if you post it, we are going to just save all those filters into the filters and save it. Redirect. Okay. So the next thing we need to do is add a template. Oh, sorry. We need to ensure that this is in the accessible field for the report entity to be saved. Like that. And we can then create the edit filters template around here. Edit filters. Okay, so this function has a couple things. First one is we are defining a widget. This widget, what is a widget? A widget is a class in CakePHP that will encapsulate the logic of a control. So you can add specific logic to the widget to control how this control is displayed or actioned inside of the widget class. And then you can reuse the widget, or even better, put that in a plugin and reuse it somewhere else, right? if the widget is generic. So in this case, we are creating a new widget class that we name it as condition integer widget, which is a widget that will show you two things. First, a drop down with a condition like greater or equal, lower than, whatever, right? And the second input that will, or control that will display, is going to be the value. So you will be able to say, okay, I want to filter by percentage done greater than 50%, right? That's the objective of the condition integer widget. So then what we are going to do in this view is actually create a form, but only show the columns that are integers. And for each column, we're going to use a control named as condition integer. You see here the type of the control will be condition and the type, condition integer, with the idea of create new condition widgets in the future, right? Condition date, condition boolean, condition whatever, right? For now, we just have one of them. So we are going to create that particular widget, which is going to be stored here in this class. Good. So if you see, this widget class is named condition integer widget, extending a basic widget that is the widget that CakePHP provides. It's also using a dependency that we decided to manage from inside of the widget, but you could manage it from outside as well. And we are going to see an example in a bit. In the case you don't want to manage all those widget dependencies internally of your classes, you can also let CakePHP do it for you if you pass that as a string when the widget is created. So what the widget is going to do, this is the code basically. Every time we use form control and use this widget, it will render two things. The first thing is going to be a select with some options. You see the name is going to be the name of the column or the name of the field, and then it will add condition to it and then display the options like this. And the second thing is going to be the value. So we are going to name it as data name value and then whatever data, right? So that's going to be for the widget. And then if we go now to the controller and remove the DD, we have, and let it pass through to the edit filters action, we can go back to here and say, I'm going to edit this one, for example. I'm going to add it to test 3 projects. GNU, I don't care. I don't care. Ooh, report builder view. This is wrong. Edit filters. This is in the wrong place, possibly. Condition integer widget. Where are you? Okay. Widget class, invalid argument exception. Integer widget. Is this in the right place? looks like it. View widget. View widget, report builder, view widget. Yeah, it is here. And this type is condition integer.
Maybe you should place it in source directory in SSC.
Yeah, you're totally right. This one goes here. That looks better. Thank you. Okay, let's locate it now. So, for example, the ID is an integer, right? So if you see, you have a drop down here, and then you can select the condition. For example, I want IDs greater than 10, and I want default version equals 5 or 4. So when you submit, you should actually, I don't think it is saving it right now, because no, it is saving. Okay, so we should be able to see it here in the RB reports. Yeah, there you are. So you see this filter here. Well, it's not looking good, but you see here the filters are JSON coded into the database right now, and you can see actually the values, right? You have here this one, for example, default version ID value 4, right? And condition equals. So it's getting saved. So the last step we would need to do in the case of this widget or this feature is to actually implement the parser to convert those conditions into the query. So apply it to the where part of the query. That is what we are going to do next. So we need to execute the apply filters on the reports table run. Run somewhere around here, right? And now we need a function, apply filters, that will basically read those filters and apply them to the query. This is a very basic, naive implementation. Strategy pattern should be here, etc. But you can see for each filter, we are reading the value and the conditions. And the condition, if there is no condition applied, we ignore that filter. But if there is a condition applied, we apply whatever it is in the filter based on the query builder function matching the condition. In this case, it's a greater than or equal, less than or equal. And you apply all that to the query. So now if you go back to the report and run it, you should see nothing. This one, for example, you see nothing because the conditions are weird. Possibly there is nothing, but you can see the conditions are correctly applied here, right? So you're actually filtering the data coming from the database for projects with ID greater than 10, we have none, or projects with default version equals 4. Oh, sorry, and equals 4. So this would be for working with the integer filters. The same way we could think about working with dates, which maybe makes a more appealing filter, because we can have this kind of related filters for dates that could be useful. If we do that in the report conditions, I'm going to add a couple more conditions, like this month, last month, and this week, for example. Okay. So we get that. We need to create a new widget in the right place this time, hopefully. And this widget will be like this. Okay, in this case, the widget is slightly different because we only have one select for it, and the select will use the name. The condition will be one of these, but the values for that condition are going to be defined here: this month, this week, last month, right? Last but not least is to ensure that the widget is added to the edit filters. Edit filters. So we add a new widget. You can add the widgets at an application level as well if you're going to use it in different templates or etc. Right? You can actually add them, for example, as part of the bootstrapping of your view file. There are some places you could use, but I'm updating all the widgets here, so you have them on site. So this is going to be condition date, and the other change is now we need to also display, obviously, like this. So we are now going to display date field, date types and integer types. If you go and check it, for projects, continue. So now we should see also default version. The project maybe doesn't have any date, only date times. Let me get the issues. Yeah, issue has a due date, which is actually a date, not a date time. So due date. Now you can select if the due date is this month, right? And then applying the filter. If you run the last test, you will see the conditions correctly applied at the end, like this, right? That's for widgets. So the rest of the contents we have 6 minutes to go. So I think it's enough for today. Because if I get into the simple pagination, I don't know if I will be able to make it. But if you are curious about the rest of the things, they are all here. We have content for some more time. And around here, you have a more complex example of a widget that is going to do autocomplete for associations. So for example, if you go to here, this is the project in the workshop 1 feature. Sorry, branch. And let me show you quickly how that looks like. So we can create a new report, and this is test 2. And it's going to be issues, for example. So I'm going to add projects. And it's going to be ID, this and that, and project ID and name, for example. And now if you go to the project, you can see how the autocomplete widget will work. If you follow conventions, the foreign key for the belongs to association will be identified. So you will be able to navigate the parent class or the parent association, in this case projects, and use an autocomplete library in JavaScript to autocomplete automatically, which is something that could be useful for like a generic widget if you want to extend it in the future. And some other goodies that are there inside if you have time for more. I don't. So thank you for your time today. I'm wrapping up. If you have questions, now is the time. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll be around the rest of the event. If you have any question, just reach me out. Thank you for that.